Welcome to my 11th video in the third chapter here. And this is a optional video that if you skip this, it's not going to hurt your project in the long term. And this video is going to focus on adding pop-up damage text to my attacks so that whenever I attack a monster, it will... Oh, I started in a weird spot. It will pop up a damage number over the thing that you hit, or if you took damage, it'll pop a damage number up. So you can get some kind of visual confirmation about the relative strength of different things. Because right now we just get flashing red and that's about it. So to kind of start this, I do have a package that we can import. So we'll want to go to Import Custom Package and pop up damage text 2D. I did slightly tweak it from the 3D version that we used in the previous project, Asteroids, so that it actually works on the plane, the X and Y plane that we're using instead of X and Z that Asteroids used. So we'll import this, and that adds two prefabs to our collection here. It is also going to remind us that we do need to import the Text Mesh Pro components, and so let's click that as well. In order for this to work. That's a built-in Unity feature. We don't need the examples and extras. We can always import those at a later time, so that can kind of come back. And so that brings us the text here. I believe all the settings are correctly established, but it doesn't hurt for us just to kind of make sure that they stayed the same. And so it looks like font, do I have a choice here? Let's go with this Liberation Sans. 3 is correct, bold. Looks good. Then down here, that's that's where it can tweak how long things may last for. Let's expand this shader out, and I actually want to turn on a slight outline because it is kind of hard to read with so many different colors. I'm going to click the box for an outline and a thickness of 0.2. That way it gives it a little bit of a black outline around the text. But all the other options look good, and so we're good with this prefab for the pop-up text. The game assets does need to be included in any anything that we do choose to use this in. So I am going to swap its tag around so it's easy to see. And then I'm going to drop it in. It has to go into every scene that there can be damage text in. So we pop it here so that it shows up inside of the overworld one. We do have to save our scene before we go to the next one. I'm gonna go and add that into Cave 1. I'm gonna save. If you switch scenes, it'll actually ask you to save. I'm gonna drop that game assets into Overworld East and then Overworld South. And so it doesn't matter where the object is. It'll work if you do. So I'm gonna jump back to the regular Overworld and save. So now we've just got to actually utilize it inside of our text. So I guess let's start with the basics. Let's open up the player scripts, and we'll start with the sword slash because that's kind of the most straightforward thing that we have that causes damage. And to make it easier for me to facilitate doing this in other parts, you know what, I'm actually kind of disappointed I didn't put comments on these. Really only need the big ones though. So I wanted to put in a spawn text method. So public void capital S spawn text with a damage amount and a location. I suppose we could even also take in like a is critical if we wanted to, but we haven't really been computing criticals, but the pop-up text does support that. So let's set up our color. And I'm going to go with gray for the sword. So color, text color equals new color. Remember that it takes color as a percentage of each component, so I'm using floats to do this. So it's basically 70% on the scale to white, being a light gray. Well, I actually don't think we probably would need this. We can probably just go straight to damage popup.create, and that will be at location, damage amount, text color, and is critical. Although actually, you know, come to think of it, let's add a text spawn location here. And why do we have this? Is so that we could actually, you know, bump the text up on the y-axis a little bit. So like when we send in the location, we can still further tweak the location a little bit here, just if it doesn't look right. And then we can do that. All right, so we've got this core spawn text method. We're going to actually copy and paste this into a lot of different things. And to actually use it inside of wherever we deal damage, so right here we're dealing damage to an enemy, we want to pop up the text. So and so we're going to add some spawn damage text. So we're just going to say spawn text. We are using damage for our damage. And then it is actually convenient to say other dot closest point to transform dot position. So what it will do is it will find the point, it'll spawn the text on the collider, the closest point of the collider to this sword slash. So it kind of like rotates it based on the angle that it's hitting at. And then we also need to specify that it is not a critical. And so we've got all that stuff kind of specified inside my method, and it is here. So let's hit save. And every time we hit with the sword, we should be getting a damage number popping up. So then once we do this, all we've got to do is just go find every part of the program that we deal damage in and assign a pop-up text for it. And so, all right, so we've got a problem right here. The text is appearing behind things. We don't really want that. We want actually the text to be in front of stuff. So the solution that we're going to use for that is to actually put the text on a separate rendering layer. So let's go and do that. Go find the prefab for the damage text. So that's a script. So we should have a different layer here, not a physics layer, but rather a rendering layer. And it looks like right here. under extra settings inside of the Text Mesh Pro, we need to specify that this needs to be in a new sorting layer. So you see that there's only the default one there. I want to say that's under project settings. And there's layers, tags and layers. So close out, this is the physics layers. We actually want sorting layers. And you'll see that there's only the default one, but let's add a new one and call this damage text. Let's make it no spaces just to be on the safe side. And so if we switch this prefab, so we're going to close out of that. Now we can actually change this sorting layer from default back out of it. So now it has damage. I had to unselect it and reselect it to get it to refresh the inspector. And so this is inside of the Text Mesh Pro parts, then extra settings, and then switching it sorting layer from default to damage text. That will appear on top of the existing stuff. So that means that the default layer is the lowest. So now this text prefab is going to always be on a higher sorting layer, so it's always going to appear on top. And you can see that that is the case. And this is where I was mentioning, like, if we wanted to make the Y position of where this spawns different, because it basically just spawns exactly where I hit. That's fine. We can probably play with that in some manner or form. All right, so with that, we have success. And now all we've got to do is go through and everywhere there's damage, add this. So let's go to the player fireball next. Jumping over to the /, I am going to copy this because I'm going to drop this spawn text method inside of anything that is going to be spawning text. And I know the player fireball is capable of spawning text. So like right after this delete method, I'm going to put it in here. And then we're going to grab this spawn text method, and anywhere we're calling hit, we need to call this. So we're going to call this, and it's going to send in AoE damage instead. And instead of other, I believe it was called item. And so that's going to pop up the damage there. But that was only for the AoE explosion. I think we call hit in a few other places. Well, let's just do Control F. Now, keep in mind, if you use Control F in Visual Studio, that it does search all the open documents. So I do want to switch it to current document. And I want to search for hit, open parentheses, to get the method. And I can see here I've got this instance and that instance, but I've already done that one. And so we've only got it here that we've got to worry about. So we're going to put this here. I guess we're using actual damage as the name. And then it was called other in this context. So now the fireball should be spawning damage numbers. Let's go check that. It is a little bit weird because if you hit with the AoE attack, you're going to see that it deals 5 for the direct hit and then 10 for the, or 15 for the splash. So there's our 5. And then the 5 and the 15 are kind of hidden. It would be a little bit of an overhaul to change that so it adds them up, which is a little bit beyond the scope of specifically this video. So let's change the color here because it doesn't make sense for my fireball to be dealing gray damage. So let's switch it out to be kind of like an orangey color. Now, if you're going to follow some game design principles, you probably should be consistent. Like if you're going to have damage types, like you should have physical damage always be a color, magical damage be a color, and if that is going to matter in your game, then you'd want to stay consistent with your text colors. However, I do not think our project's going to get to that point, but that's something to keep in mind, that I am making this kind of an orange color to indicate that it's like a fire magic damage. And then enemies, I was going to probably just make all their stuff red, since it's hurting you. All right, so that's got our fireball done. And it should work for all of our different types of fireball. So you'll notice that the little firebolt should deal, I think it's 5. And then if we hit with the big wave, skeletons aren't going to let me charge that up, I bet. It is 45. And that looks good. Alright, so we've got the player attacks covered. Now let's go through and do this and add this method for the enemies. So I'm going to copy the method. I'm going to close the little search. And the next thing we need to worry about is, I suppose, enemy projectile. So we'll put our method here. I'm going to grab the spawn text, and it applies its damage right here. And it is dealing damage, and it's calling it other, so it looks fine. Don't have to change anything about that. So the projectile is good. I forgot to put my comments here. And then we had it up here as well. All right. And then the individual enemies don't actually have any hit calls. It is actually all inside of enemy for our melee attacks. So this is a big script, so we can always search for hits, open parenthesis, and we can see that it brings us to that, but that's not what we want. Dot hit. And this is the only place where it actually calls that. So inside of the attacking region, the point blank AoE attack, we have a call here. So we do need to grab our block of spawn text. While I'm over here in enemy projectile, let's just make this red to signify that it's an enemy hitting the player. And then inside of enemy, we need to add spawn text, which I'll put after gizmos. And I'm going to grab the spawn text thing here. And right after we apply this, we'll do our extra. And put that here. And this one it is called item, so other is going to need to get renamed to item. And then we are popping open melee damage text. And so that looks like that should work. Save that. And now that should actually be all of the references to spawning text and dealing damage in our entire thing. So now if we return back to our project, every time an enemy hits us, we should be getting that same damage text popping up over the player this time, indicating how much it hit us for. Blobs, I believe, hit for 10. And so you can see that it's popping that 10 up whenever it hits us. And the skeleton, when it throws, I think it hits for 15, but we're not close enough. And it hits us for 15. Now, we don't actually have any sort of like hit invulnerability. So like you can kind of get stun locked by a bunch of enemies. And I think you could probably imagine how you would go through and add in some kind of like a ticker that every time you get hit, it gives you a temporary bit of invulnerability. But that could be something we explore in a future video series or video set. A little bit closer towards the end of the project. Some balancing issues. So that actually wraps up our damage text. So now anytime damage happens, and in future videos I am going to reference if we need to do damage text here. But now we've actually got some good visual indication when damage is being dealt, how much damage is being dealt, And it kind of makes combat a little bit more meaningful because we actually get some specific numbers to it. Now, I don't really think my game is very well balanced, but that's okay. That sneaky slime gonna get you. And so we've got success. So the next video we will look at adding sound effects, which will then allow us to increase some of the immersion of our game. So thank you for watching, and stick around for sound effects.